The nation came for potatoes and found a borderland with opinions. And it can be said that if it wasn't for Aroostook County or Presque Isle, that there would be no Drive-Thru Towns podcast. You see, my mom was born and raised there and met my dad when he was stationed at the Air Force Base there. And they went on their first date, a blind date, to the Northeastland. When we stayed with my uncle, I walked every square inch of the place, climbed to the top of Haystack Mountain. In Presque Isle and Caribou, see, the soil wasn't just dirt. It was destiny with frost on it. For a while, Aroostook County was the potato capital of the world, and these two towns sat at the center of the empire. Railroad towns, military towns, harvest towns, places where school schedules bent to the crop and the crop bent to the calendar. Then the empire got older, machinery got better, Idaho got irrigated, and the whole place had to learn the humiliating art of surviving after you've already been the best at something. Drive through today and you'll see what looks, from a distance, like a county that was built too big for its own population. Wide streets, big schools, industrial leftovers, storage sheds and potato houses. A landscape designed for a 1950s future that arrived, flourished, and then politely stepped out for a cigarette and never quite came back. But keep your eyes open, because in Aroostook, the ordinary stuff is the headline. A road becomes a trade route. A field becomes a market. A school closes for harvest. The town isn't just near the potatoes. The town has been organized around them, like a nervous system around a heartbeat. This is Drive-Thru Towns. I'm Andrew Wilcox. Now, before the boom, there was a fight over the map. The Aroostook War was a bloodless boundary dispute with Britain in the 1830s. And though it never became a true war, it mattered like one. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty settled the border in 1842, securing the fertile northern Maine lands for the United States just before the region's agricultural rise. That's the strange thing about geography here. The line on the map got argued over before the dirt got rich enough to make the argument worth it. And rich it was. Not in gold, but in spuds. In the practical, mud-caked freight car kind of wealth that doesn't sound glamorous until you realize entire communities were built around it. Aroostook's potato story started small, then surged once transportation improved. The military road opened the county. The railroads arrived in force in the 1890s. Suddenly, the isolated North wasn't isolated anymore. It was export territory. That's when Presque Isle and Caribou really became themselves. Presque Isle began as a settlement called Fairbanks, founded by Dennis Fairbanks in 1828. Caribou's early development followed a similar pattern. Woods, mills, stores, farms, then infrastructure. In both towns, the 19th century was less about spectacle than about accumulation. Roads, warehouses, railroad sidings, churches, schools, the slow assembly of a regional capital that didn't need a skyline because it had acreage. One detail tells you everything. Presque Isle was once served by 3 railroads. That's not just transportation. That's a vote of confidence from the economic world. It meant the place mattered enough to be threaded into a larger machine. Caribou, meanwhile, grew into a community where the potato wasn't just a crop, but a conversation. Local histories describe a place where the future was argued in terms of yields, storage, and whether the soil would keep giving. That's a more honest civic language than most cities manage. By the mid-20th century, Aroostook County had become a global potato center. The crop expanded with rail access, starch factories, and a growing industrial infrastructure. In the county's own telling, the place had become a garden county, a phrase that sounds gentle until you remember the scale of the operation. This was not a backyard agriculture. This was empire work. Potatoes were shipped, stored, graded, bagged, washed, loaded, and tracked through a whole economy of barns, bins, depots, and rail lines. One 2009 county history described a local voice saying, "We buy land and borrow money to grow potatoes. Then we grow potatoes to pay back the money and buy more land." That's not a slogan. That's the local financial system wearing work boots. And the towns reflected it. Presque Isle and Caribou got wide boulevards, large schools, storage facilities, and civic institutions scaled for a future that expected growth to keep being normal. The infrastructure feels oversized today because it was built when the county believed its middle name might be abundance. Then there's the weirdest proof that the potato economy shaped daily life: harvest break. In parts of Aroostook, schools closed for weeks so students could help with the potato harvest. Even now, some districts still keep a version of the tradition alive. Though the break has shortened in recent years, it's a reminder that the crop didn't just drive the economy, it drove the school year, the family schedule, the body clock of the whole region. There's something almost comic about modern students getting time off to help harvest a crop that is now heavily mechanized. Mom would share stories about working the fields and taking time off of school in the bitter, cold weather of Maine. But the joke lands softly because the tradition carries a hard truth. This place learned long ago that community life had to make room for the field. For Presque Isle, the second great engine was military. During World War II, the Presque Isle Air Base became a critical departure point for American planes headed to Europe under Lend-Lease. Northern Maine's geography, closest U.S. land to Europe, made the base strategically important. Planes were checked, transferred, serviced, and sent off in one of the quiet logistical miracles of war. The base kept evolving. In 1959, it was transferred to Strategic Air Command. It became the nation's first operational intercontinental missile base. Then it was deactivated in 1961 and eventually turned into an industrial park. That's a pretty good metaphor for the 20th century. War asset, missile site, redevelopment project, same land, different obsession. The air base made Presque Isle feel bigger than its county seat status. It connected the town to global conflict, national defense, and the post-war military economy, all of it layered on top of the potato landscape like a second blueprint. The decline came in pieces, which is how real decline usually arrives. The military base closed. The economy shifted. Western states like Idaho, with massive irrigation projects and larger scale farm systems, took more of the market. Potato production didn't vanish, but the old dominance cracked. The region that once defined the potato world had to accept competition from places with different climates, different water systems, and newer industrial terms. That left behind a strange feeling in Presque Isle and Caribou. Not collapse exactly, but oversize. The civic shell remained larger than the current population needed, and the buildings kept their 1950s posture, even as the era that justified them thinned out. That's the modern ghost here. A town built for the height of a crop empire still standing after the empire got mechanized, globalized, and then normalized into something less grand but more efficient. No place like this survives on myth alone. It survives because farmers still plant, school boards still negotiate harvest break, local historians still tell the story correctly, and people continue to treat potato culture as both inheritance and infrastructure. The county's own memory is full of practical poetry: soil, storage, grades, rail cars, harvests. The peculiar dignity of a place that knows exactly what it produces and why. The old civic rhythm is still visible in the details. The streets are wider than they need to be. The schools are bigger than a casual outsider expects. The county still keeps one foot in the old world where agriculture could dictate time itself. It's not nostalgia, it's adaptation with a family resemblance. Presque Isle and Caribou are very American towns because they prove that wealth can be rooted in something as unromantic as a tuber. A crop shapes a border shapes a town shapes a school calendar shapes a labor force shapes a region, then a change in freight, irrigation, warfare, or global trade cracks the old arrangement, and the place has to learn what it means to be useful in a new century. That's the universal human truth buried in the potato empire. Prosperity always looks permanent while you're standing inside of it. Then the market turns, the machinery improves, the soldiers leave, the students stop picking, and the wide boulevard starts feeling like a memory itself. When I walk around the cemetery, it reveals names that I would hear about on those long road trips. Grandma and Grandpa Condon, the Nettos, Spragues, Shays, Gallaghers. Mom was best friends with the Kelly girl who put 6 kids through college, owning a coin laundry. Before my grandfather passed, we visited him. 98 years old, and he took us on a tour. Couldn't see or hear well, an old Maine laborman that a few years earlier actually fell off a scaffolding fixing a barn door. It actually improved his hearing and sight for a period. He was bony, but strong. So into the backyard of the house that he built for my grandmother. Without seeing, could tell you the train tracks would be coming up on the way out to Mapleton. As the Randy Travis song goes, I thought that he walked on water. The last thing that he said in good health, but knowing it would be the last time that I saw him, was that he would be praying for our first child that would be born months later. When that day comes, I believe that I will step over to the other side and he will be waiting for me, throwing a ball to the dogs that I've had over the years, fixing something or just running his thumb over something to see if it was working right, or in that afterlife, just giving the topic at hand a really good thank. He and they are angels amongst our family. So here's the last thing we're saying about Presque Isle and Caribou. They are not relics. They are afterlives. The potatoes still matter. The schools still make room for harvest. The old military logic still echoes in the landscape. The towns are still larger than the headlines, still carrying the weight of a century when Maine's north wasn't the edge of anywhere, but the center of a world that needed fries, starch, seed potatoes, and shipping crates. And if you stand there long enough, between the fields and the boulevards and the old industrial bones, you can feel the whole thing breathe once, slowly, like a field turning over in spring, like a county remembering that it was, for a while, the center of the plate. This has been Drive-Thru Towns. I'm your host, Andrew Wilcox. Special thanks to Chloe Jones for providing our music. If you enjoyed this journey, please follow the podcast to stay updated on all our upcoming episodes. To keep the conversation going, you can connect with me on Instagram at 50 State Family. Find me on LinkedIn under Wilcox Legal, or reach out directly via email at wilcoxlegal@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next road.
'Cause I was wandering free on an American dream, with a million things to see and do. But it's all good, I'm fine. Had the time of my life, 'cause I did it all. We